Welcome back to the Book Nook, everybody. You know, one of the coolest things about this show is you, the listeners, get to pick the books we deep dive into. And this one came straight from you.
Was this the memory one?
It is. It's Dean Vaughn's How to Remember Anything. Sounds pretty ambitious,
The
right?
total proven memory retention system.
That's the one. And look, I know we all wish we could just download knowledge straight into our brains, Matrix style. But hey, maybe this one guy's got some tricks up his sleeve. And our listeners specifically asked for the most actionable stuff from this book. You know, things they can actually start using right away to give their memory a boost.
Well, it's a good thing then that Vaughn's system is very much about practical application. He doesn't just talk theory. He provides concrete exercises and techniques designed for immediate use.
So basically what we're going to do in this deep dive is we're going to pull out those immediately usable strategies and exercises from Vaughn's system. So you, dear listener, can walk away with some memory tools ready to go.
Sounds like a plan. Now, one of the most interesting things about Vaughn's approach is how it leverages our natural ability to remember what we see. Visual memory. We're really good at that. And he builds his whole system around this idea.
Okay, so you're saying it's not like memorizing lists of words or anything like that.
Not exactly, no. It's more about creating vivid mental images and then organizing those images in a way that makes sense to your brain.
Okay, so that brings us to the first core technique that Vaughn introduces. The numbered room system. I think he also calls it the cube, right?
That's right, the cube. And don't let that word intimidate you. It's not about complex math or geometry. Think of it more like using a familiar space as a mental framework, a way to hang information on something you already know really well.
So, like a room in your house.
Exactly, like your bedroom, your office, your living room, any space you're super familiar with four walls, four corners, a ceiling, and a floor.
All right, so this is where it gets actionable, right?
Absolutely. So the very first exercise Vaughn recommends is setting up your own cube.
How do we do that?
You mentally assign each number from 0 to 9 to a specific location in that room. And he's got a system for this. 0 is the ceiling, 1 is the back left corner, 2 is the left wall, and so on. So you're basically creating this mental map, this grid, in your chosen room.
And you call this the units cube. Is that for numbers 0 through 9?
You got it.
Yeah.
It's your foundation for remembering things numbered 0 through 9. And hey, listener, you can actually do this right now as you're listening to us.
Yeah, take a minute. Think of a room. It could even be the room you're in right now. Picture those 10 locations. The ceiling, the corners, the walls, the floor. And then just mentally assign each number from 0 to 9 to those spots, just like we described.
This is where it all starts, your units cube.
Yeah.
It's like building the first level of a mental filing cabinet.
Okay, so we've got one room, our units cube, for numbers 0 through 9. But what if we need to remember more than 10 things?
That's where it gets really interesting. Vaughn explained how you can expand this system by using other familiar rooms. So say your bedroom is your units cube. Your living room could then become your teens room for numbers 10 through 19. You just apply the same numbering system to the locations in your living room, but mentally add a 10 in front of each number. So the ceiling in your living room would be 10, the back left corner would be 11, and so on.
And then, the kitchen could be your 20s room.
Exactly. And your bathroom could be your 30s room. You get the idea. And the key here is consistency. Location number 9 is always the floor, no matter which room you're using. It's your anchor point across all your mental rooms.
Okay, so we're building out this whole mental palace of rooms, each one dedicated to a set of numbers. That's pretty cool. But how do we actually start putting information into these rooms, into this system?
That's where the next key technique comes in, audionyms. And this is where things get a little more creative, a little more fun.
Audionyms. So we're talking about sound now.
We are. The basic idea is that you take something you want to remember, particularly abstract things like words or names, and you turn it into a concrete, sound-alike object that you can visualize.
So it's like turning sounds into pictures.
Precisely. You're bridging the gap between something you hear and something you can see. And as we talked about earlier, our brains are much better at remembering images.
Okay, so give me an example of how this works.
Sure. So let's take the name Hayes. You could turn that into hay, right? It sounds similar, and you can easily picture a bale of hay. Or Grant could become granite, a big, solid rock.
And it doesn't just have to be names, right? Could we do this with, states or countries?
Absolutely. Take the state Maine, for example. You could picture a lion's mane. Sounds similar, easy to visualize.
Okay, I'm starting to get this, but what if the word or name is more complicated?
Vaughn's got you covered. He says if it's a word you're already familiar with, your audionym should be something that instantly brings that word to mind. But if it's an unfamiliar word, you might need to get a bit more creative. You might need to use a combination of sounds or images. Like, for Algeria, he suggests owl cheerleader. It might sound weird, but it's memorable, and that's the point.
Okay, so listener, let's try this out. Think of your own first name. What object, or maybe a really short phrase, sounds similar to it? Something you can instantly picture in your mind. Take a moment to really see it. That's your audionym for your first name.
Now try it with someone you met recently, but whose name you're struggling to remember. Convert their name into a sound-alike picture.
This is fun. Okay, so now we've got our mental rooms and we're turning sounds into images. What's the next step? How do we actually connect these things and make them stick in our memory?
That's where association comes in. And this is where Vaughn really emphasizes the importance of being illogical. The more unusual, the more ridiculous, the more out of proportion the connection, the more memorable it will be.
So you're saying, like, a normal logical connection isn't as effective.
Not as much, no. It's the bizarre, the unexpected, the things that make you go, wait, what? That really grab your brain's attention.
Okay, I need an example.
Okay, imagine a chicken riding a horse. Kind of funny, right? But now imagine a horse wearing a chicken as a saddle. Much weirder, right? And then picture that horse suddenly exploding with chickens. That's what Vaughn's talking about. The sheer absurdity makes it unforgettable.
That's a pretty wild image. I think I'll remember that one. So how do we apply this to actually remembering things?
Each association should involve only two elements, something you already know, like a location in your mental cube or one of your audionyms, and then the audionym for the new thing you want to remember.
Okay, so listener, let's put this into practice. Remember that audionym you created for your first name. Got it. Good. Now imagine that audionym interacting in a completely absurd and illogical way with one of the locations in your units cube. Maybe your name sounds like tree and your ceiling is location 0. Imagine a giant tree growing out of your ceiling, roots bursting through the plaster. Really exaggerate it. Make it funny, make it strange, make it unforgettable.
And really involve your senses. What does it sound like? What does it feel like? The more vivid you make this mental picture, the stronger that association will become. You're basically creating this ridiculous little scene in your mental room.
Yeah.
And that scene is what's going to help you remember.
This is amazing. I'm already starting to feel like I can remember anything. Okay, so we've got the basics of Vaughn's system down. We've got our mental rooms, our audionyms, and this crazy illogical association technique. But how do we actually use this stuff in real life?
That's the beauty of Vaughn's book. It's not just theory. He gives you tons of practical applications for these techniques.
Okay, so, like, what about something we all struggle with? Remembering names.
Yep, that's a big one. And Vaughn has a whole section on this. He says, first and foremost, really focus on the person when you meet them. Make eye contact, listen to their name, and don't be thinking about what you're going to say next. He also says, don't be afraid to ask them to repeat their name if you didn't catch it the first time. And be sincere. Genuinely show interest in the person you're talking to.
That makes sense. It's harder to remember someone's name if you're not really paying attention to them in the first place.
Exactly. And then, of course, you can use the audionym and association techniques we've been talking about. Turn their name into a picture, and then link that picture to something unique about their appearance or something they mentioned in conversation.
Vaughn even suggests making physical cards for your audionyms, like little flashcards.
Yeah, it calls them audionym cards. You write down your chosen audionyms for common first and last names on little 3x5 cards and use them to practice. That way you're building up this mental library of sound-alike images that you can readily access.
That's a great idea. I'm totally going to try that. Okay, what about other everyday things? Like remembering where you put your keys or your phone. I do that all the time.
Yeah, we've all been there. And for that kind of thing, Vaughn has a simple but effective technique he calls the 2-second lock-in. As soon as you put something down, like your keys or your sunglasses, take 2 seconds to create a quick, illogical association between the object and its location.
Like, how would that work for keys?
Imagine your keys suddenly sprouting little legs and running away from the hook you just hung them on. Or if you put your sunglasses on the counter, picture them growing giant eyes and staring at you. The weirder, the better. It just takes a couple of seconds, but it can really help you remember where you put things.
That's a super useful tip. Okay, so what about something like remembering your schedule for the day or your to-do list?
Vaughn suggests using your mental rooms for that too. You can assign to-do items, again converted into audionyms, to locations within a designated to-do room in your cube. And for your daily schedule, you can assign events to locations within rooms representing days of the week.
Oh, that's interesting. So like Monday could be my living room, Tuesday could be my kitchen, and so on.
Right. And then within each room, you can assign specific times to specific locations. So maybe the ceiling is 8 a.m., the back left corner is 9 a.m., and so on. You're basically creating a visual map of your day.
I love how everything comes back to these mental rooms. Okay, one last thing. What about remembering things we read?
Well, instead of trying to memorize every word, Vaughn suggests focusing on the key ideas, the main takeaways. Identify those, convert them into audionyms, and place them in your mental rooms as you read. Then, when you're done reading, you can mentally walk through those rooms and review the information.
It's like we're building these elaborate mental sets for everything we need to remember.
Exactly. It's all about leveraging that powerful visual memory, turning abstract information into concrete, visual scenes that are much easier for your brain to store and retrieve.
We've really just scratched the surface here, haven't we?
We have. We've covered the basics of the numbered room system, the power of audionyms, and the importance of illogical association. But there's so much more to explore in Vaughn's book.
But even with just these basic techniques, listener, you can start experiencing a real difference in your memory. It's all about practice. The more you use these techniques, the more natural they'll become, and the more you'll be amazed by what your brain can do.
If you found this deep dive helpful and you're intrigued by the possibilities of improving your memory, I'd highly recommend checking out Dean Vaughn's book. He goes into a lot more detail about these techniques and also covers things like remembering numbers, speaking without notes, learning languages, and so much more.
It's really a fascinating exploration of your own cognitive abilities. Who knew remembering things could be so much fun? Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone. And until next time, keep those mental rooms tidy.
And filled with chickens.
Especially the chickens. Those are important.
Can't forget the chickens. They're the key to it all.
All right. We'll see you next time, everyone. Bye.